Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this very exciting side event on the implications of artificial intelligence on the organization of industry and work. So a key priority under South Africa's presidency this year is to advance discussion on the multiple ways in which AI is reshaping and influencing the way policymakers think about jobs, the labor market, and the nature of work. So it is not only fitting, but also an honor to be hosting Professor Susan Athey. Professor Susan Athey is a globally respected economist and pioneer in the field of assessing the intersection of economics and technology. She is a professor of economic technology at Stanford University and has served in leadership roles across academia, government, as well as industry. This has included roles as chief economist at the US Department of Justice, as well as a consulting chief economist at Microsoft. Her lecture today will explore how artificial intelligence is transforming productivity, reducing barriers for entrepreneurs, as well as altering industry structures. I've heard several people talk about AI, and the one tip that people tend to give me is that to keep your job safe from AI, you need to learn how to use AI to do your job better. With that said, please join me in welcoming Professor Athey for her lecture.
So thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here among this group of people who are all spending so much effort and attention to try to solve some of the world's biggest problems. It seems like we have enough to worry about without a major technology shift, but we do see a technology shift is coming. When we go to talk about AI and you try to get an expert opinion, it's actually pretty difficult to get a grounded view. First of all, among technologists, people are very focused on just what the technology can do. And they tend to split into two camps. One that thinks that we're all going to be on the beach sipping daiquiris in 10 years with drones bringing us food, and another who thinks we're going to blow ourselves up. And both of those issues are around really what's technologically possible. But it leaves aside, well, exactly who's sitting on the beach and why are the drones bringing us daiquiris, and how did we get there? How did we get from here to there? On the other hand, when you look at what's happening in the world, or you look in the governments you work in, or the firms that you interact with, what we're doing today is not at the technological frontier in most cases. How many software applications do you use every week that you curse at? And how many times is it very difficult for you to accomplish a task? How many people's jobs are merely copying information from one system to another? All of those problems can be solved with technology even before the latest artificial intelligence advances, but yet we didn't make those changes. In addition, some products are very expensive, even though they're cheap to make. We see a lot of market power in the digital sector. And so the idea that only what technology can do and at what prices is the only part of the story is, of course, very short-sighted. And indeed, other reasons that we see the world the way it looks today have to do with incentives and market power. So if you ignore all of these facts and just focus on the technology, you might come to these extreme views. I think the good news and the bad news is when you take into account economic and business realities, we won't go to either of those extremes so quickly. But still, some things may change very fast. And so in this talk today, I want to take a much more grounded view coming from an economics and business strategy perspective. I want to give a lot of concreteness around the technology we're talking about and how it works. And when you put all those things together, you can have a much sharper vision of the future. Once you have a clearer vision of the future, it becomes easier to figure out which problems to solve and how to prioritize. So that's my goal today. So when I've been speaking about the impact of AI on the economy for many years. In fact, more of my research is in methods for machine learning and artificial intelligence than it is on the impact. But because I'm an economist who understands both, it's been very common to be in parts of big and small groups brainstorming about this. And as you sit in the room listening to people talk, listening to experts, having panel discussions, you start to realize how hard it is to wrap your head around everything at once, because each speaker is speaking about one piece of the puzzle. I think after the COVID pandemic, it's a little bit easier for people to wrap their heads around what happens when you have a shock that changes many things at once. We saw people change where they work. We discovered bottlenecks. Some bottlenecks, markets could adjust and prices could change and we could get good things reallocated. Other bottlenecks, we got stuck and we just couldn't get the things we wanted or needed. Prices went up. We also saw big interactions between the product markets and the labor markets. So maybe it's a little bit easier now for people to imagine how much our intuition breaks when the world entirely changes. But I think that's also going to be the case with AI. AI and its applications, that development is going to respond to incentives. And some incentives, especially by large firms, is going to be to produce the most output at the least cost. And so that may mean replacing lots of workers, which is normal and good. It helps productivity. But what happens to those people? How do those people transition? On the other hand, there may be lower commercial incentives to build technology that's also possible, but technology that augments people. Technology that allows lower skilled workers to do jobs that previously required higher training, higher entry barriers. And if we just look, for example, at what happened to car services globally, you used to have to know maps and you used to have to know a city, and then technology came that helped drivers navigate better than they could from memory, and that allowed people to be successful drivers with less training and less entry barriers, which of course created disruption and conflict as well. So government plays a key role in what it procures and what it incentivizes, and whether we actually develop the technology that will help lower skilled workers become more productive by using AI to augment them with expertise that previously was difficult to acquire and created barriers to entry in labor markets. In terms of some of these other feedback effects, of course, if you have market power in industry, that can lead to high prices. And so a really big question and a theme in my presentation today will be, will prices fall at the same time costs fall? And so some of the cost savings will be fixed costs. We're going to make corporate headquarters more efficient. We're going to need less accountants. We're going to need less lawyers. We're going to have more efficiencies in R&D. And so those may or may not lead to falls in prices. They could reduce entry barriers, which can create entry, which can lead prices to fall. But we shouldn't necessarily assume that just because things get cheap and don't require people, that consumers will achieve those benefits. And then as we change the nature of the production function, that has fundamental impacts on how production is organized globally. So another theme I'll emphasize is that historically, there were large-scale economies in digitization. If you look across firm size, small firms generally aren't using software much at all. They're doing everything on paper, but they have transitioned to using messaging like WhatsApp or WeChat to run their businesses. So we do see some digitization on the very low end, but generally, we've seen the more advanced adoption of machine learning taking place for the biggest firms, for the tech firms, for the largest financial institutions. They've been adopting advanced AI and machine learning. The latest rounds of AI innovation have changed the barriers to entry. They change scale economies. And so that means that in principle, smaller firms may be able to participate. But in other places, scale economies can get bigger, like in the production of AI. So that's going to restructure production globally, from everything from the tiny entrepreneurs who weren't using any technology and now can run their businesses through voice and AI, to the structure of manufacturing and other types of software applications and the rest of the economy. So that's why we need to care about the industry structure. And there's feedback effects in all of these dimensions. And of course, where people live will then follow where they need to work. And countries, which countries win, which countries lose, is also up for grabs. Oops, sorry. One other point I wanted to make, just here from some recent work by Daron Asamoglu, empirically quantifies just a few of these feedback effects. On the top graph, they look at how employment goes down as automation increases. And in their work, they also find localized kind of downward spirals or feedback effects when automation comes into a city and there's a lot of displacement in a concentrated area. In another paper, they look at the impact between automation and the aging workforce and show that in countries that have aging populations and thus expensive labor, we've seen the most investment in automation. So that's just emphasizing that all of this stuff responds to incentives. So I have here a little bit of a tortoise and a hare. When people ask me, what I'm scared of, I don't think the daiquiris on the beach are necessarily going to happen, but I'm also not, that afraid of the entire economy and the entire technology changing very quickly. But some things will change quickly. And so that's the hare. The hare is moving quickly. And on the other hand, policy responses often move slowly. And so the question is whether our slow and steady tortoise is going to deliver the things that people want and need before the racing hare, the chaotic hare, knocks over a lot of our current institutions and leads to a lot of chaos. And the one I put on the top here, societal and cultural change, that's not really economics, and I'm not going to directly provide evidence about that here today. But I do just want to emphasize that we will see change, and it's going to be scary. It's going to be scary for people to see what technology is doing, and if they're not a part of it, that will be intimidating. It's going to be very easy to imagine what governments are doing, what firms are doing, conspiracy theories, and just general fear. And that can lead to political economy problems. So I just want one reason that we have to move fast and we have to do a good job, I think, making sure that this technology very quickly benefits people, is because there's going to be these other forces that are going to be making people scared. And being scared doesn't always lead to good, thoughtful policy, especially when you're facing really fundamental challenges and a lot of transitions. And then a second disruption is just prices and wages. And again, what's going to be really important to people is, of course, they care about nominal prices, and we've learned that through the pandemic. But in the longer run, what's going to matter is, can we deliver people services that they can afford with their wages? And while everything's getting cheap, it's got both wages and prices can potentially fall. We need to figure out how to make sure the prices fall fast enough. The restructuring of production, and again, this may be efficient, we may be able to produce more with less, but we still are going to be in a scenario where transitions occur, and transitions are not easy. I think we've done a very poor job in the past of helping displaced people through transitions, and so we need to get a lot better at that if we want to have this transition be smooth. And as I mentioned, we also have empirical evidence from the past and a lot of case study evidence that focused labor market disruptions, focused in geographies, can be especially problematic. And so if you look at places that they used to be coal mining and then they moved to be outsourced call centers, those places could go downhill very fast because the call centers are getting rid of people very, very quickly. And that is something that could happen, over 5 years. We've been predicting it for the last 10 years. So when we see geographies that have focused in something getting disrupted, that's a particularly thorny problem. In terms of the policy response, well, all of this technology is actually really well suited to a lot of the things governments deliver. We deliver healthcare at scale, we deliver education at scale. Those things can be made much, much better, much, much faster. We can have people who didn't have a lot of skills and knowledge can become excellent coaches when complemented by an intelligent, expert AI that is designed to help solve the consumer's problem. Also, there's a lot of people in government who, in the end, move paper around, move data around in a way that could be automated. And so government efficiency is a great opportunity. As well, many government operational services, ranging from transportation to other kinds of logistics, can also be improved. Industrial and competition policy, if we're thinking ahead to where is the growth going to be, where is growth possible, how do we support that? How do we make sure that small businesses are able to adopt these new AI products, and that AI products are built that are customized for each country and each industry so that small businesses have amazing software that works just as well for them? And just to preview, my view is that it's going to take competition in AI as well as competition in the application layer to get there. Otherwise, you see what we've seen in the past sometimes, which is a one-size-fits-all application that everybody in the world is supposed to adopt, but that really doesn't meet the needs of people in certain countries, depending on their language and culture and local legal structure and institutions and so on. Finally, one of the particular areas that I think is overlooked, we're used to worrying about the people who are displaced from manufacturing automation, but entry-level workers in general are going to have problems, and even white-collar entry-level workers, college graduates. We are already seeing in Silicon Valley with the Stanford graduates and so on, that in the last year, many fewer jobs for people doing coding. They've really cut back on hiring software engineers. Senior ones are doing great, but the entry level, not so much. Paralegals, all these entry-level jobs. I don't hire as many research assistants to do coding for me, to do data science for me, because it's just faster to do it myself and do it iteratively with the coding tools that we have. And I have also non-technical people now writing code in my research lab. So that's a really big change, and that means that we are going to have to really rethink how young people acquire the skills that make them expert and make them valued in the labor market, and hopefully also that they can become entrepreneurs in some way. We can have more innovation with these young people, but if the young people are unhappy, that's going to change the political economy as well. Okay, now I'm going to spend a few minutes, and I'm going to get really concrete. So some of you have probably all of you have had a briefing that said this is how AI works. A lot of times that doesn't focus on the things that matter for economic policy. So I'm going to get a little more detailed, but I'm really being selective here for the things that are going to be important for the economics. So a first thing is just there are lots of different ways actually to deliver a service to a consumer behind the scenes. So all of you have used a chatbot like ChatGPT. In that case, there's a foundation model provider for ChatGPT. It's OpenAI. They trained a big model, and then they have a very lightweight interface where you're almost talking directly to the model. This is kind of unusual, actually, to have a software product where you're like connecting directly to lower layers. Like in search engines, and I spent several years working on a search engine in the late 2000s, but in the search engine, you have click prediction algorithms and all these classification algorithms and then user interface. So there's all these algorithms, but they're like layers down from what the user's actually talking to. But here, the large language model, actually, what it does fundamentally is it takes text in and it puts text back out again. So you're really talking to the model. That's one reason this can be a little bit confusing, because sometimes you might talk directly to the model, but other times there might be intermediaries in between. So many of you may also have had experience with an internal chatbot, and that's been one of the first products that many businesses have built, partly because it's so easy. I'll show you a little later, you can vibe code one in like 30 seconds. So I show you how to write the code for one. I did it last night to make the slide. So you might be very impressed with your IT people, and your IT people are wonderful, but making an internal chatbot is not hard. Nonetheless, it is still making something. So in that case, someone internally made an internal user interface, again, very lightweight, very easy, and then it's making API calls to ChatGPT. It's sending the OpenAI what you wrote, and it's bringing back what the response is. But it might have your company logo on it, and it might also be searching your company documents. So that's an example of an internal business application. It might have file access as well to your internal documents. That's very easy to build, but that is built by the company. That's an internal business application with API access. Now, if you're building a customer care chatbot, that's still pretty easy to do these days. But you have to make a lot of decisions. You have to think about how big the icons are. You have to make sure that you've thought through all the scenarios, all the questions users might have. So even though it's cheap for a company to build that, it's also cheap for a startup to make a chatbot in a box. And so the way this might work is that a startup says, hey, I think a lot of people will want customer service chatbots, so I'm going to make a general purpose customer service chatbot. As a startup, I'll get really good at thinking about what chatbots should look like, and then I'll sell it to business customers. Those business customers will customize it, will put their own company logo on it, will choose which things are relevant and which things are not relevant, and they'll also plug it into their internal systems, and now you have a chatbot on the screen. But now there's multiple layers, because the business is doing the last customization. They bought it from, in the green, this chatbot in a box company. The chatbot in the box company is able to sell it for cheap and be able to get startup funding because it's actually very cheap to write the software. Why is it cheap to write the software? Because they're using AI coding tools, so they can just tell it what it wants and the code gets written. And if they want to make a change, they can change it in 5 minutes. Okay? And all the changes can propagate and so on through the code base. So this becomes very, very simple to do. But there's many ways it can be accomplished. And what we might see in the future, let's see. Let's see. Can you advance the slide? The clicker's not working. Okay, maybe while the tech people try to advance my slides to the next one, I'll just mention what I was going to say on that slide, which is that what we could also see is the foundation model provider might try to integrate into these other layers. So the foundation model providers might say, hey, we want to provide the platform services. We want to provide the developer tools. We're going to make chatbots in a box. And so the aspiration of these big large language model providers is actually they're going to do everything. They're going to take all these other layers. And then all you have to do as a firm is just open up ChatGPT and say, hey, can you build me a customer service chatbot? I don't even know what it should look like. You tell me. Look at my documents. Look at my data. You can figure out whether they need to do returns or what else they should think about, and just make me a chatbot. And you would speak that in just the way you ask a question to ChatGPT today. Okay? So that's an alternative vision of the future. And either is possible, and I think what we're going to see is both. Now, there's a few other concepts I want to mention. You've probably heard about agents, and it's just what it says. An agent is when the AI goes and does something for you. Already, if you use conversational AI search, if you use an AI-based search product or some of the versions of ChatGPT, you can ask it to search the web for information. Then it goes and gathers that information and summarizes it for you. That's a simple version of carrying out a task. It executes a search request, gathers the results, and summarizes them. But in general, these agents can do more complicated things. Like you could say, please go find the lowest price presentation clicker and buy it for me and have it shipped to my home address. And so then it would go to the website and it would actually carry that task out. Inside a business, it could say, hey, I'm doing my performance reviews. Can you please gather all of my emails with each of my direct reports, organize them into folders, find the biggest presentations they've made to me, put it all together, and then draft a summary of what each employee has done this year, and then bring it to me to edit. Okay? So that would be an agentic thing, because it would be accessing different data sets, different data sources, looking through your email, pulling it together, and getting it ready for you. And of course, you could just ask some chat agent to do that, or it could be a custom application built by your HR team, or you could buy it in a box and your HR team could adopt it for you. Okay, all these different things are possible. The last thing I'm calling them super apps just to distinguish. That's more of this vision of the general AI, this human-like AI that can just do everything. And that's when you just tell it, hey, I want to do performance reviews, figure it out for me. And it will come back with everything organized. Okay? But also, that same agent could also say, hey, go shop for me, and that same agent's going to ping you and remind you of birthdays and suggest a gift and prepare briefings before your next meeting and do data science for you, everything. Okay, this super app, that's what it means. It's like general intelligence, and it's going to be able to do anything a very smart human can do. Now, technically, that may become possible, but I'm going to argue that it's unlikely to be the case in the near future, because in order to accomplish that vision, that general AI has to have access to everything. And all the things, all the other data sources, all the other businesses, all the payment rails, the banks, the credit cards, the shipping, the e-commerce providers, the productivity software, the internal databases, the health databases would all have to cooperate. And they don't want to, because they will lose if they do. So that's going to be one of the forces that slows this down or stops it. Now, this slide is kind of busy. I just want to really give a highlight that there are actually lots and lots of different types of applications, and these are there's things that go way beyond just a simple chatbot. For example, there are developer services and tools, and I think those are very important because those feed everything else. They make it easy for anyone to create an application. The consumer user, we've all seen, the chatbots and the assisted search, but there's lots of other consumer uses coming down the line, whether it's health advisors, financial advisors, tutors. Already, our students are using this like crazy. The teaching and assessing will never be the same. But the students are finding, like for something like doing a math problem, the fact that they can ask to see a proof 5 different ways and can ask questions about the step they didn't understand, that's pretty powerful from an educational perspective. But sometimes consumers won't do things themselves. Sometimes still you need a coach. I think anybody who's tried to get in shape or tried to go on a diet or tried to just commit themselves to learn a new subject when they have a day job, those are hard things to do. And we generally do better as humans when we have other humans keeping us accountable. So another way that this can work is not just that one agent talks to me, but that also there's a service provider who has a coach-client dashboard who coaches me. The AI is helping the coach both behaviorally coach me and provide the right content for me. And then there's also a user dashboard that helps me carry out my tasks. The internal business users might be doing everything from forecasting to HR to accounting, customer management, and then there's all sorts of business process automation. Now, each of these types has distinct data and development requirements, general versus specific data, different user interface, different guardrails, different safety. Some of them need to understand all of general knowledge, and they need to use the very biggest models. Other ones, like if you had a nurse running around a hospital, you want it to respond very fast, and there's a limited number of answers it should give. So you really don't want to carry around all of human knowledge and wait for a long-winded four-paragraph response if you ask a question about the patient's health. Like, you just want to know, like, should I give them more morphine? Okay? And so my prediction is that because so many of these use cases do not require all of general intelligence, but they maybe do require some natural language input, but then maybe like a very specific coded output, there will be room for lots of variety here, and they also can be served by lightweight models. Not all of them need the fanciest, biggest, best, most expensive AI. Another big challenge will be build versus buy for the customers. Are these customers going to especially the business customers, going to build their own apps, or will they buy them? Now, just to get a very specific example, this is from one of my former students, Dan Bjorkendren, and a group. They actually got this product out within a year and got some of the research done within a year of ChatGPT's release, which just shows that if a research team can build something very fast, very lightweight. So what they did is they built a customized, localized AI chatbot for teachers and released it in Sierra Leone. And so the idea was that the teachers could ask questions, and it would give answers from a database of the curricular content that was customized for the context. And so first of all, they looked at what did the teachers do. They looked up facts and concepts. They looked up lesson planning, and assessment was a big task for the teachers. They used it, and they have a lot of data about how they used it. One of the things they did was compare it to search, and they looked out at self-reported usage by teachers and found that in Sierra Leone, among teachers, they used WhatsApp, but they actually didn't use search engines a lot. But they used this chatbot more, and they dug into why. Well, one thing is and those of us traveling here worried about getting throttled will notice this. If you're out there using your data plan and you go to the web, it uses up your data really fast, and it might not give you relevant information. But when you talk to a chatbot, it's just text coming in, text coming out. It's much more efficient, uses much less data. A second thing is that when they took all the questions that the Sierra Leone teachers put into the AI chatbot and instead plugged them in to Google from within Sierra Leone, only a tiny fraction, that little blue sliver, returned results from Sierra Leone. The rest of it came from the US and a few other big countries. That meant that it was very difficult for the Sierra Leone teachers to find local content. And they did a bunch of comparisons of why from a survey for why the teachers liked the chatbot. They got a useful answer right away. It was more concise, more trustworthy, unique content, better with their internet access. They can ask follow-ups. And so this made the teachers more productive. Okay? This is an example of what's possible when AI is cheap and available. Okay? And they also showed that this was actually less expensive to serve than search. So the last bit of detail I get into before I get back to big picture, I know everybody here is in macro, so I get back to the macro. I do want to just highlight open models, because open models are really important relative to what I just talked about. Open models are free, and anybody can download them. And so you could build a product that they use ChatGPT, but they could build a product like that using an open model for free. And the fact that it's free means that some entrepreneur somewhere in any country could build a product just like the one that I just described for the teachers in their country, for the nurses, for the midwives, etc. So what is an open model? Well, most people have at least been presented regressions if you've been working in economics and finance. So regressions, you have y some outcome equals x beta plus epsilon. You create a linear model, and then you use data to train or estimate your model and find the estimates beta hat that give you the best prediction of y. Now, in the lingo of open source models, those beta hats, they're called weights. And it makes sense, because suppose your x's was just like a binary input, whether you were whether it was, say, a rich or poor consumer, and the beta hat would be the weights that you would put on those indicator functions, and it would make a prediction by just multiplying the indicator function times the estimated increase in y from being a rich consumer. But the key is, if somebody tells you beta hat, like they could just post them on the web or put them in a research paper or put it in an Excel spreadsheet, that means if you go anywhere in the world, as long as you have those beta hats with you, you know the functional form is x times beta. So if you just fill in your x's in another column, you can multiply them in Excel and get a prediction. Okay? So you own that prediction, basically. Knowing the weights, and you have to know what the x's are, you own that, you can use it forever. That is what an open weight model is like. So instead of predicting like some kind of output, like some kind of spending or something, instead you're predicting the probability that, say, the word is cat. Okay, there might be 30,000 words, so there are 30,000 probabilities you're predicting. And what are the x's? The x's are the words that came before it. Okay, these models predict the next word given words in. So your previous words, or the prompt, or just some sequence of words are the x's, and there's some function g that gives you that probability. Everybody knows what the function is that, like, say, Meta Llamas use. It's published on the web. It's hard to write down. Well, you can write it down recursively, but it takes a computer to calculate it. But it's just like using Excel to multiply the x's and betas together. It's just a computer function. If you know the betas and you put in the words, it'll put out the probability, not just of cat, but of every word in the dictionary. Okay? So once you have those beta hats and you know the function, you can keep it forever. So 20 years from now, people can still use this. You say, oh, well, new words will come up. That's okay. There's also great software for optimizing these models, and you can do something called fine-tuning, which is make it fit new data. So if I have, say, today's open source model, and I want to adapt it to new words that come around, I just have to hand it new data, and I just continue the optimization, and it will be, voila, suited for that context. So this very popular technology is out there. It's out there forever. The equations can be written on half a page. I built models like this myself before ChatGPT on small, not with a vocabulary of 30,000, but with smaller vocabularies. And, it took a master's student, 2 weeks to get it going. So it's not hard to do. The only thing that's hard to do is to have enough compute and data to do it at scale and have engineers customize it. Now, as we go along, there's going to be more and more stuff on top of it, so this will get harder. But it is something that if you're all you need to do is understand language and translate it into some meaning, we already have that technology. It's never going back. Okay, and so it was, of course, also completely predictable that any country that wanted to can do this too. It may not be commercially viable. It may not be the best, so they might not choose to do it. But if they needed to or wanted to, they could. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the future of the industry. So I want to just first motivate, like, why should macroeconomists care about the structure of one industry? Well, this AI is a very special product. It's important for national security. It's going to be an input to every company in the economy. If we have a market power, imagine we had a monopolist that was, of course, lives in a country. Okay? If we had that kind of monopolist, what does that do? It's going to create all sorts of cross-country trade access, national security power dynamics. It creates tension and uncertainty because at any point in time, you can put export controls on that product. And so the fear of that is going to make everyone else very nervous. The higher prices for access will lead to slower growth, to cross-country inequality and participation. If something's expensive, it will be used for rich purposes, high-value purposes, not necessarily for social good, and will have within-country and cross-country political economy challenges. In addition, what we've seen already in tech is that if a big firm has a key input, they can extract all the profits from adjacent businesses. And we thought credit cards were powerful until they met the iPhone. Okay? And then Apple said, hey, you can't have our NFC radio, and we're actually going to take 10, 15 basis points off the top of every credit card transaction, and you can't stop us. Now, eventually, actually, financial regulators could stop them if they chose to, but Apple bet correctly that they might have at least 10 years of charging the fee before people got around to saying, no, you can't do that. So if you have access to something that everybody needs, either consumer attention or an input product, you can actually extract the profits from adjacent firms, even if those adjacent firms are highly concentrated. Okay, I mentioned credit cards because this is a finance conference, but you go across the economy, many, many industries with concentrated players have suffered from this. That's also going to hurt domain-specific, country-specific businesses, and it's going to make it harder to have global participation. Countries are trying to procure if prices are high. It will be expensive for them to do that. Poorer countries could end up with smaller AI ecosystems. They'll get fewer outsourcing opportunities as well because AI replaces a lot of outsourcing, and they'll have missed opportunities to upskill or reskill their workforces. The application industry structure, so that's like the next layer. That's all these health coaches and custom business applications. Competition there also matters for similar reasons. Business customers and end consumers benefit from competition. More countries participate, they create localized products, and with competition, country growth can benefit. Of course, companies and investors are making bets on a wide variety of scenarios, and there's tons and tons of mergers and acquisitions and investments right now. OpenAI trying to buy hardware. They tried to buy a coding startup. According to the paper, that just fell apart because Google outbid them, took the people. I don't know, whatever the newspaper said. We're seeing just huge kind of land grabs right now as everyone's trying to control the products around them. But despite all of those land grabs, I'm going to come to a conclusion here that the industry structure for LLM will not be a monopoly. And there are many ways to get to this conclusion, but one of them is just to imagine a hypothetical. So imagine that one firm, just suppose it's a US firm, has a large quality lead in a closed model and nothing else is as good. We're heading in that direction. What will other firms do? What will governments do? Well, first of all, countries, again, if there's a huge technology lead by one country, then there'll be a temptation to do export controls. So any country that's worried about that will have the incentive to invest to try to promote their own innovation. And if they are really worried about trying to procure it, they can invest in open models, which allows their entire business ecosystem to contribute. And they may innovate in ways that they can work around lack of access to chips. I would say, I had this all written up before DeepSeek came out, so after DeepSeek comes out, it becomes a little bit redundant, but I still think that's important logic to remember that can be done again. And again, from the other country's perspective, it doesn't matter that your new model won't be as good, won't be as efficient, might take you twice as much expense to build, twice as many people, could be 10 times as many people. If a country views this as existential for their national security, they'll spend the money. What will matter in the end is just can they make something that's good enough that they can keep up. And of course, the big tech response is also predictable. Now, of course, any of these could be the monopolist, but imagine the monopolist wasn't one of the existing big tech companies. Each of them has assets. Unless all the Android phones in the world suddenly explode, we're going to have Android phones for a long time in the world. And those Android phones can push a Google AI, even if it's not good enough, even if it's not as good. But they'll have data. They'll know the location. They also have relationships with millions of advertisers, millions of small businesses. So they can compete in ways that are difficult for an entrant. It takes years to sign up millions of advertisers. And once all the people who are paid subscribers sign up in the US, then who wants to serve the people who are too poor to sign up for a subscription, who will never sign up for a subscription? But these ad-funded companies can. They can do that profitably. So they can capture the free consumers, the poorer consumers in the world. And that will make room for them to gather data and get a better model. So you can go through other companies similarly, but if any of them was looking at someone else having the key advantage in AI, they've got billions of dollars, they've got years of locked-in customers, and they can use those years and spend those billions until they at least get to be good enough. Okay. So, and that's putting aside any kind of nationalist policies or things like that, any kind of industrial policy that tried to sponsor local champions. Okay, so if we're not going to have a monopoly, we still have a big question of what the world looks like. So here's one vision of the world, one that I think is sort of more likely in, say, the next 5 years or so. First of all, we're going to keep having Android phones. We'll keep having iOS devices. I actually think we are likely to have new entrants. I didn't put them up here, but they may not succeed. But I would bet 20 to 1 there will be a new hardware device, a new operating system with some traction in 5 years. Because if you don't, anybody who's making AI is going to be really unhappy looking at this picture, realizing that they have to go through phones to get to their consumers. And the phones control the location, the phones control the consumer data, the phones have the context to know where you are, and they can, and they have in the past and will in the future, lock others out and give themselves advantaged access. Things like the European Digital Markets Act hypothetically makes that illegal, but it's been a couple of years and they still haven't fully enforced. There's a long process to enforcement, and in those years, anybody who wants to provide a full AI agent to their consumers will be locked out if they don't have hardware, or if they don't make a partnership. So here I'm imagining a partnership, say, between OpenAI and iOS, but of course that may or may not happen. It could go any way. Then within those phones, consumers will say, hey, this is what I want to do, and through that app, they will access all the services they do today. So the app will be the entry point, and it will go off and do things for them. It will know their calendar. It will anticipate their needs. It will write their emails, remember the birthdays, everything else, do the shopping. But in this picture, there are still things stacked up that aren't coming out of the assistant. And that's partly because any incumbent that actually has existing market power for whatever reason actually is not going to want to play ball with that assistant. They've seen this movie before. They've had their profits taken away by middlemen. If they can keep the relationship with the consumer, they will. So just taking an example, Amazon, they have distribution in the US. They can get me products within 5 hours where I live, and many, many, many products. Other companies are years behind that. Even if you spent all the billions you wanted, it would still take you a while to be able to deliver things fast. So if someone like Amazon says, hey, I don't want to play ball with Google's assistant, they can just ask to make the consumers come directly to them, and because they're better, they're faster, they're quicker, then consumers will go to them. Okay? So that will keep everything from collapsing even on the consumer side. On the other hand, on the business side, I've shown a variety of different types of ecosystems and products. And so my prediction is for businesses, there will not be an AI agent that does everything for you. Why is that my prediction? Because, go back to my earlier comment, how many enterprise software products do we all use that we hate, that are bad, that are clunky, that are slow? Okay, people are stuck on their enterprise software products, and it's not technology. It's just very, very hard to change. They can change, and some of them will change, and some of the icons on this picture will undoubtedly die in this transition. But they have a fighting chance. Why do they have a fighting chance? Because they have control of data, and they can choose whether to make that data available to others. Now, of course, if you say, hey, my company has all their stuff in a database, I'll be really mad if my customer database is not accessible to my AI. Well, they'll say, hey, I'll let the AI make a few queries here, but if you want it to have full access, no. You have to pay, or that's not possible, or oops, it broke. Oops, it broke again. Oops, sorry, it's not working today. Okay, and so they can make it difficult for you to interoperate with somebody else's product because ultimately they're controlling access to the data, even though technically the customer owns it. And there have been, again, a lot of examples in the past where companies that provide software that help you house other people's data have not provided access to it. Health records is another huge example like that. They don't play nicely with any other applications. And what that does, of course, enforcement will come, antitrust will come, but it'll be years. And in the meantime, those companies have a chance to integrate AI into their own products. And if there's a vibrant ecosystem of enterprise-grade foundation models and a vibrant ecosystem of developer tools, then whoever owns the customer today can integrate AI. It won't be as good, but it'll be good enough, and people won't switch. So some of them survive, and some of them don't play ball with the general AI and the AI agents, and therefore we see some competition. And all that matters for the LLM competition is that across all of this, there's enough different unique customers with unique different needs that they can support buying from a variety of competing, differentiated large language model products. Okay. So this is just a picture of, just to kind of drive home the point, if there was a general purpose agent, a general super app that was trying to do everything for everyone across business and consumer, it would have to plug into Amazon, to Walmart, to iPhones, to Apple Pay, to Android, to Google Pay, to credit cards, to Salesforce, to law. It would have to plug in. And so you would have to believe that all of these players, all the way around, none of them had enough power to say no to this, okay? And I just don't think that's likely. So as a result, I don't think this is going to happen soon, which is good, because then we don't have to fear some like crazy scenario where one super technology does everything. Just to see a little more what this might look like, and this is the productivity applications that probably many of you have seen in your own work, there are really two workflows you could use. Now, this workflow on one side, you've probably been told you're not allowed to do it at work, but in fact, I'm sure many people are still doing it, at least until they get an enterprise subscription. They keep the ChatGPT in one screen and, say, a word processor in the other screen. Okay? This is the workflow our students are all using like 100%. Okay? And they're going back and forth between these things. They're uploading a document. Say they upload the meeting notes. They ask for a summary, get something out, and then put it back into the word processor. Okay? Now, hopefully this is, if you're in a business, you have an enterprise subscription, so they're not sharing your company data, but this is a big issue because, it used to be you would type something in the search engine. Now you're uploading documents, so the data leakage is a much bigger issue. Now, this is bad for anybody who makes a word processor, because now you don't care about your word processor anymore, and you're not even using its interface. Everything's getting formatted and done over here in the chat. But another way that this can go is that you have an enterprise subscription, say to Microsoft products. All of your documents are in SharePoint, and so actually this is all authenticated already. There's no leakage. Everything's clear. It actually understands. It sees your calendar. It sees your meetings, and actually will. It'll just upload the meeting notes automatically. It anticipates your needs, and you use it inside of Word. And so if the word processor can partner with a good enough AI agent, then it can provide the AI to you inside its product, and you don't have to go outside. So this is going to be the battle between people integrating AI inside and people going outside. And again, the prediction is that some of the people will win at bringing it inside because it's more convenient. They have access to data. Okay. So overall, enterprise and government adoption may be fast and slow. Things like Google was adopted very fast. But what did it need? You just had to go to your browser. And actually, enterprises couldn't really stop you. Like at that time Google came out, like they didn't even really have the capability to stop you. And so workers went to Google, and they went there fast. ChatGPT came out, you go through the browser, workers go to ChatGPT, and that got very, very fast adoption. But that doesn't mean that the rest of the adoption will be fast. The cybersecurity is a super big deal. We have agents going around reading from one database, copying to another database, synthesizing things together. I mean, this is a cybersecurity nightmare. So you're not going to want to take on a lot of new vendors here. You're going to want to stick with what you know, and so firms will be slower to do that, especially as the agents get more advanced. So many, many factors will make that slow. Just to summarize now my take on the way this market structure works, there are a lot of feedback effects here, but I'll just sort of talk through them once around. If there are lots of barriers to entry and incumbency, that means that we'll have a more segmented application market. The more segmented the application market, the more customers there are for someone who provides general purpose LLMs. And some people will want a light one, and some will want a heavy one. Some will want all of knowledge. Some will only want medical knowledge. Some will only want to know legal knowledge. So there'll be room for lots of LLMs to support that. Also, if things are segmented, the LLM won't be able to absorb and just integrate all applications and become just one big company at that middle layer. And the more competition there is in applications and in LLMs, the better likely we'll see that both chips and cloud computing will also support multiple players, because that's what their customers will want, and they won't be worried that things will tip to just monopolies, and they won't therefore want to line up with them. So all of these things have reinforcing effects, but my prediction is that it's more likely we'll have at least some segmentation in applications and some competition in LLMs. And that's going to be important for outcomes. But policy will drive how much of that there is. One just quick warning, though, is that a risk factor for concentration is vertical integration. If you have concentrated industries with scale economies, they will, if one firm vertically integrates, like if, say, Google has hardware, phones, operating system, and an LLM, that scares everybody else, because they're worried, who else can I partner with? And so then they're going to want to make exclusive deals, and nobody wants to be left out of the game of musical chairs. And so we've seen that as well in digital ecosystems. We see a lot of vertical integration, multi-product firms, and that can tip things towards concentration very quickly. All right, so now let's talk through what happens to non-tech industries. So first of all, LLMs are general purpose technologies, but so are general developer coding tools. So a general purpose technology has broad scope for improvement over time, pervasive use across sectors, and it contributes to innovation in downstream sectors or complements. Historical examples like steam engine, electricity, computing. These things restructure industries, restructure the world economy. Business software and digital infrastructure is also a general purpose technology. This is what makes companies efficient. This is what allows companies to grow, increase the span of control. It's needed to expand and manage firms, historically correlated with scale. AI-based developer tools, this is something that hasn't been talked as much, but I'm asserting that AI-based developer tools are even more transformative than the last generation of business software, because every business process can be automated at low cost, software can be maintained at low cost, and it can be applied to internal business applications and software as a service. So AI-based coding tools can make more business software. It can make it better, more customized. And it specifically has a big impact on development, because it can allow digital leapfrogging where small business adoption costs fall. So imagine you're a small business and you're running your business on chat. Then you can just talk to your phone. It can listen to your conversations. It can read your conversations, and it can help you run your business. So here's an example coming back to this like chatbot customer service example. First of all, as I mentioned, we could have a business could buy a chatbot as a service and then customize it. AI coding tools come into every part of this production process. They're used by the large language model providers. Like the companies that make large language models are using their own tools for coding and don't hire as many software engineers. The people who build the chatbot as a service are using AI coding tools. Then the business that's implementing them and connecting them to their purchasing systems and their payment systems are also using coding tools. So the AI is part of this pipeline all the way through. Still, there's a big question. When coding becomes cheap everywhere, do you build or buy? Because it's cheap to build, but it's also cheap to buy. And there's still some scale economies. So we're going to see a lot of that play out, where I think companies will first try to build everything themselves, then they'll start buying things, and there'll be some kind of mixture in the end. I promised I'd show you the AI coding tools just to see how powerful this is. So this is a package called Cursor. You can download it. It takes about 5 minutes to download. You can create an account. It starts out as free. In the red is what I put in. And it's a little hard to see, but that's just like a prompt that you would have in ChatGPT. Okay? What I said there is, please write Python code for an AI agent that will chat with the user. It should start with the prompt, start each chat with welcome to the economics chatbot. It should allow the users to upload, give a directory for 9 PDFs, and then all of the answers should cite either the PDFs or the economics literature, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I just wrote that little paragraph in, da-da-da-da-da-da. I pushed go, wait about 30, 45 seconds. Then it says he creates 202 lines of Python code. And that green stuff appears on the other side of the screen. And down at the bottom, it says reject or accept. If I say accept, it's going to take that, and I've got my Python program. And if I already installed Python, which also takes about 5 minutes, then I can run the program, and I've got a chatbot. I do need an OpenAI key for the API to make this run also. Otherwise, I've had undergraduates with no technical experience install this kind of program and run it in half an hour. Okay? They've never installed Python before. So this is very, very easy to do. By the way, you can also put LaTeX on there. You can tell it to write up an open economy macro model or anything else in LaTeX or teaching notes, and you can ask it to edit. It'll do algebra for you. It's a little bad at general equilibrium with like 5 equations. It gets a little confused about what's endogenous and what's exogenous. But it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It'll do simulations for you. I found those also to be low quality so far, but it's very close. But it'll write the LaTeX for you very nicely and do a little algebra very effectively. Okay. I mean, you can also write LaTeX in ChatGPT, but this keeps track of it, and it'll show you the changes, and it'll keep track of every change and let you roll it back in a very nice way. That's a tool called Cursor. All my students at Stanford are using it. They do all their code that way, even all the computer science students. They don't write regular code anymore. That's dead. Okay, so what are the impacts of this type of thing? Well, in the previous world, the scale economies were sort of inside individual firms. So I worked in a search engine in the 2000s. We had to write everything, all the code from scratch. It was very slow. I was working for the Bing search engine, trying to catch up. It was very slow to write all that software, everything proprietary. Over the early 2010s, more and more open source software got created. Things that like just running a complicated logistic regression. I had to write the code from scratch in C#. In the late 2000s, all of that became available. But still, if you didn't have proprietary data and billions of dollars of revenue to justify hundreds or thousands of software engineers, you weren't doing the most advanced machine learning and analytics. And that was something I was very worried about when I went to this kind of conference around 2010. I was like, wow, there are like 3 or 4 companies in the world that are doing advanced AI, and the rest of the world is just out of it because it's not that hard. And anybody can do it. Any school district can do it. You can make these tools, and then you can actually just vibe code. That's what it's called when you chat with that. You vibe code and say, oh, I want it to do this other thing, and I want it to give the teachers more advice, and I want it to only look at these materials, and so on. You can make it work better. So an optimistic scenario is that we have reduced scale economies and leapfrogging. Enterprises are the consumers of AI applications, and LLMs lower adoption barriers, especially for small firms. Again, if a firm is placing its orders, say you've got a small retailer, they're placing orders to get more inventory over text, they're receiving orders from their customers over text, maybe they're doing payments over text. If you just have an AI listen to all of that, it can actually create your order database without ever having to do anything at all. And that's pretty powerful for improving efficiency for these firms. Just as an example, a lot of this stuff already exists even pre-LLMs on WeChat. So in China, there's software applications that sit on top of WeChat that plug in just like I said. They allow booking, scheduling, ordering, marketing, customer service, digital payments, inventory management, accounting, shift scheduling, analytics. All of that can just be done by someone through their phone through WeChat. That type of product could be brought to the world and made even better and even easier. In my MBA class, somebody showed an example of a firm that just sold a little camera that could watch stuff come in and out of the store, identify and recognize everything, and update the ordering based on that. And of course, in places where people don't want to be part of the formal economy, they were able to do their inventory management that way without creating a cash register transaction, for good or for bad. The Treasury doesn't like that. And so there's all sorts of efficiency gains. The idea of, in general, is that we can really let startups work on, or that startups are currently working on business operations in a box, and the smallest businesses can adopt it using AI, using natural language interface without understanding anything about accounting or operations. Now, of course, just coming to some of the bigger policy implications, we, of course, have a lot of issues with transitions. This is just some charts from a research paper I wrote that was looking at laid-off Swedish workers. There's been many, many studies of layoffs and displacements. I use some of the machine learning techniques that I've developed to try to divide laid off workers into the most and least resilient. And this is predicted based on what happens to them before they lay off. And this is about 22,000 layoff events in Sweden. And so this is using administrative data. The key I want to look at are the people, the 10% of workers who predictably did the worst after layoffs. The solid line is what would have happened to them if they hadn't been laid off, and the dotted line is what did happen to them. And again, using causal inference techniques to compare. And so what we see is that this worst decile was actually people whose prognosis looked pretty bad. These are older manufacturing workers whose income was likely to decline, earnings were likely to decline, probably due to future layoffs. The being laid off, though, brings that sooner, and they never recover from it. So we see here from this previous round of automation displacement that we had very vulnerable workers that were hard to reintegrate. Okay? I think we need to do better with the next round of innovation. I've done some work also on building things that help workers make transitions. This is just a small example from a tiny company in Poland that was offered a mentoring program to help women get jobs in the IT outsourcing sector. They were doing UX design. Sadly, I think AI has probably made this no longer a growing sector, but it was when I did the project. And we developed a little program where women did six projects, little mini projects. When they came together, it was a portfolio, and it demonstrated their ability to people trying to hire. So we kind of solved the chicken and egg problem for non-standard credentials by asking employers what they needed to see and then creating a program so that users could create it. And then we showed here the treatment versus control group in terms of the share getting a job in tech, and this small program, which cost about $15 a person, got people a lot of jobs. So this is just a case study, but in general, I think that we can get scalable digital interventions that can coach people into making these transitions. You should all go read David Otter's work. He has a recent paper that really is much clearer than a lot of the prior literature about the fact that automation both replaces and augments expertise. And he really focuses on the fact that if AI augments generic tasks where there's elastic labor supply, then on average, that job becomes more expert. And so actually wages can go up, although employment could stay the same or go down. But if you automate expert tasks, that makes a job more generic, lower wages but higher employment. So software coding is something that's a little more mixed. It automates both generic and expert tasks. And what we've seen is that already big tech has stopped hiring entry-level coders. But on the other hand, there's a lot of unmet demand for coders in the rest of the economy and the rest of the world. There were all sorts of projects people didn't do because it was too expensive and it took so long. So it's possible that those entry-level coders will be sucked up into that. But I still really want to watch out for these generic new college graduates. In terms of general equilibrium effects, Daron Osamoglu, as I mentioned, has empirical work about downward spirals. Some of the places I'm very worried about right now, call centers, traditional IT outsourcing, although they're automating a lot of what they did with AI. But on the other hand, there's new jobs for AI implementations. Bank information workers, I've been talking to banks about AI for 10 or 15 years. They've been telling me all this time they have tons of workers who are doing automatable jobs, and including customer service and call centers, but also a lot of their regular line workers. And I would expect a lot of displacement in banks and entry-level white collar in general. I'm also working on a theory and policy paper with Fiona Scott Morton. And there we really focus on the general equilibrium effects of market power, the fact that a monopolist can extract the profits from adjacent firms, and so AI prices can be a tax on the global economy. In addition, monopolists can keep prices high and find it profitable to keep prices high if there's redistribution, and kind of exploit that and tax the system. So the government role is to procure and subsidize AI-based tools that make displaced low-skilled workers more productive. provide key services more efficiently so that the cost of living stays low, and competition policy to make sure that actually prices fall alongside of costs. Here's an example of how technology could be used to augment nurses. I have a paper that describes a project I did in Cameroon where we built a tablet application that helped nurses counsel patients. And we found many positive outcomes, but one of them is that the patients actually learned more and talked about more different options and alternatives with the nurse when they were guided by this tablet application. And they also made choices that were more aligned with medical outcomes. I'm coming close to the end here. I just want to also highlight another paper, if you never saw it. Hal Varian has this famous Bots and Tots paper where he points out that even ambitious predictions about how AI and automation will hurt labor demand, those numbers are much smaller than the coming demographic crisis in developed countries. And so actually, another way to look at AI is it's the solution to our problems, that we are not going to have enough service workers to take care of our old people, and health is going to bankrupt us fiscally. If we could make lower skilled workers or fellow retirees safe and effective caregivers, that could reduce the fiscal burden, make people better off, allow people to age at home, and keep people employed. Government IT. I think governments need to rethink procurement strategy. The citizens' expectations rise. You're going to have fiscal pressure due to transition costs, but there's so many opportunities for government efficiency, more efficient customer service, less corruption, just more predictable responses. But you need nimble product managers to specify the solutions and manage the vendors. And we have to really rethink procurement strategy in the age of low-cost, more nimble software development, and identify key blockers or inflexible IT systems. So just to conclude, we've got the tortoise and the hare here. There's a lot of things that are going to happen very fast, and that they're going to make a lot of people excited, but also a lot of people afraid and a lot of people mad. The policy response needs to be measured and careful, but there's so much we can do to make people better off. And I think maybe our hope for hanging on without chaos is that we actually figure out how to make people better off faster than they're made worse off in other ways, and that we really invest in managing the transitions for people who are displaced better than we have in the past. So let me stop here and take questions. Thanks. And so I think do we have a microphone coming around? There's a microphone over here. Feel free to ask questions. And in the back.
I think I'm loud enough. Susan, that was a whirlwind.
Thank you. We have people online too, so I think you want to use the
I
mic.
say, Susan, that was a whirlwind, but it was fantastic. My head hurts a little. Maybe the question is, what advice for the G20? What can we do? Thanks.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, we really need to make sure that that we're thinking about the global consequences of decisions that we make, and again, making sure that the competition occurs so that the prices and availability of all of these new innovations are going to be available to the rest of the world. I think that's very important, because if the rest of the world has better health care, has better jobs, is able to participate in this revolution, then we won't see as much pressure from poorer countries onto richer countries. That's going to have to be balanced against, of course, the fact that some of the outsourcing needs we have will go away. We're going to be closing call centers. We're going to be doing less IT outsourcing. And so those types of impacts will hurt. And of course, they'll also hurt G20 countries as well, and certain locations in G20 countries. So I think the big themes are to anticipate these localized problems, and first of all, and deal with them, like the call centers and so on, the entry-level workers, and try to have policies that help them. but also to make sure that we are providing, making all of this available so that the world, so that all the people in your country, as well as the world, feels like they're participating in this innovative revolution. They feel like they're experiencing the magic, that the magic is made for them. It's giving them the right answers. It's not something that's just in the hands of the elite, that's giving them answers that are appropriate for the United States, but not for their own countries. I really think this can be something that everyone can participate in. I'm just, part of the reason I really wanted to show you the technology is just to really hammer home that, like, anybody in this room, you know, if your life depended on it, you could write something, you know, and you might not have touched software in a very long time, but you don't have to anymore, you know, and that means we're all empowered, and we need to make sure that that's channeled in positive directions.
I have a question, two questions, one on competition, another one on productivity. So I'm from the OECD. We just produced a couple of papers on productivity, impact from AI, and it shows that it's about, goes from 1 to 1.3%. So it's kind of like the division of the ICT and the computer during the 90s and early 20s. The question is, how do you think that this is, and so we are a bit more optimistic using Daron's own methodology, we are a bit more optimistic on the impact on productivity. The question is whether this is going to be sustained, if it is only just a hump like in the 90s, or it's going to be sustained. So my question to you, in particular, if we get AGI, you think there'll be sustained productivity gains coming from the technology? The second issue is on competition. We just also produced a paper. We look at the last frontier models and see what, you know, as you say, it's not difficult to catch up to a point, but it's so far no problems on competition. We alert about the future. What could happen in the future if one, you say that even if one player gets AGI, there shouldn't be too much of a problem for competition policy or for competition tools. But it will be interesting to know your perspective as well on that. Thank you.
Sure. So starting with competition, I mean, I think the scenarios where we get one firm really far ahead is when they have a lot more data. And so it could be because, like say ChatGPT, they've just got a lot of users. They have a lot of the exact type of data you need to make a good chatbot. It could be somebody like Google or Apple because they have certain proprietary data. Maybe Apple shares it with a partner. So there's, you know, if you have proprietary data and the models, then it's possible that you get ahead, and it's hard for anyone to catch up. But part of my thinking is that there's more than one firm that has access to different types of proprietary data. And then I think the second point is that not every application needs exactly the same thing. So like with a search engine, you generally just wanted the best search engine. And of course, it could be better at travel or something else, but generally you wanted the best search engine. Here, this tool is being used not just to chat with, but also as an input to lots of applications. And then it doesn't matter that you did the best on the benchmarks. It doesn't matter that you can solve math theorems. You can prove math theorems, right? It just matters that you can accomplish the specific task. And with things like fine-tuning, it's easier to make a lightweight, not as good model work. So those are some of the reasons I'm not as concerned. But I mean, if we thought it was going to be a monopoly, we would get very, very, very concerned. It's just that that is such a bad outcome. That is such a terrible outcome that I think there are lots of forces that will stop it. But of course, governments are part of those forces to make sure that doesn't happen. So I'm not saying it's not bad or we shouldn't worry. It's just that it's almost like it's so obviously bad that everyone around them won't let it happen. And then I'm sorry, your productivity. Yeah, I mean, I'm more bullish on productivity, but I think, you know, we have seen adoption costs are slow, and I think that's where the technologists kind of miss out on things. If you want to change over business processes, you have like multiple processes running for a while. You have people working to do the transition. So like I was on the boards of companies that moved to the cloud. You know, it took like 5 years where you had like double systems in place until you could kind of cut off all the old stuff and be more efficient. But then you're not going to be done. You're going to keep investing and keep moving more and more stuff to new technology. So I do think that the productivity, we're going to be in an investment phase for a while, and that will kind of offset the shiny, huge productivity numbers. But that doesn't mean that the productivity isn't happening.
Yeah, well, I've got the mic, so let me ask the question. Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. I'm with the ILO, so my question is more on the labour market aspect. So this wording you used about focused labour market impact, and I mean, then you did, of course, refer to the work of David O'Toole, etc. Our own estimates do find that globally we would expect larger effect in terms of the augmentation as opposed to the automation. There's a smaller percentage based on the estimates we released in May. But of course, certain occupations are more exposed, looking at those tasks within those occupations, like administrative roles, etc. So just clarification on that focused labour market effect. Of course, robotics, there was that more localized effects, as you mentioned, from Asamoglu and Restrepo's work. But what do you expect in terms of more aggregate effects on the labour market? And second question, just about AI and robotics. I mean, that's sort of also what you see when you go to these big events. I was at the AI for Good Summit last week in Geneva. It's all about, the merging of AI and robotics. Any views on that? Thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like robotics, we still haven't quite, there's still a big wave of innovation to come because it hasn't fully absorbed the latest innovations in AI. And so I guess I'm still imagining there's going to be more to come there on the innovation side. I sit on all the same panels as you do probably, and I think there's a lot of speculation on, where these impacts are going to be the greatest. I think that as many of us know, the economy can absorb a lot of turnover as long as it's diffuse. I think the one that has not been, I think there's still a little bit of being stuck in the past on the automation side, and I think people are still wrapping their heads around the new college graduates, and because I think it's just this year even and next year that we're going to start to see those people have tougher job markets. But again, I see it already with the Stanford students. At least they're all getting jobs, but they may not be jobs in Silicon Valley. They're not at the huge bonuses. I had students that were medium good or were getting, $300,000 a year just right out of school to be a software developer. That seems to be going away. And that's of course happening at the top, but I think as you look across the economy, the Stanford students were going to big tech, but different parts of the distribution of graduates had different things they were feeding into, whether it was banks and financial institutions, other kinds of entry-level jobs. And a lot of those entry-level jobs, I see it's just going to be very easy. You don't need to hire someone to do Excel for you. And so make simple presentations. So I think that that's one of the groups. It's not focused geographically, but they're kind of focused politically, and I think they also drive a lot of angst and political economy. So I think I would be on the lookout for the young white collar workers to be a new source in addition to the ones we've always been talking about.
Great. So we will just take one last question, please. We are unfortunately running out of time. The plenary has agreed to wait for us, so we'll just take one last question. Apologies, Anantha, we will not be able to take yours, but maybe you can catch the professor outside or during the course of the rest of the week. Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the roller coaster ride. I want to just test your thinking or explore your thinking as an economist on information as a store of value increasingly, and how the recent AI technologies and agentic AI is changing the landscape by making information more ubiquitous, the construction and reorganization and extracting value out of information, and information, unlike other goods and services, are often non-rivalness. How do you think, as an economist, around information as a store of value? And secondly, my day job is a tax collector. And increasingly, how should tax collectors think about the impact of agentic AI from the perspective that the flow and store of goods and services are taxed?
Yeah, so I think tax collection is another example where we can get better operational efficiency and make things easier for our citizens and increase compliance, have much more effective and efficient audits. In the last few years, some of my colleagues at Stanford found inefficiencies in the way audits were taken out were conducted, for example. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there. Of course, that's going to also cut double with people's feelings about technology because, of course, more efficient tax collection may feel like more efficient government surveillance and lack of financial freedom and liberty. That may push people out of the sector, out of the formal sector altogether. So I think we'll need we can get more efficient, but we've got to do it in a way that is respectful of the human reaction to it and the political economy reaction. In terms of information and the value, I mean, I do think it's kind of profound. Like I did research, 10 years ago with large data sets from inside of firms to try to understand, people's consumption of news or things that required language processing. I tried to use language to help a reading application for kids. When we built our own little baby natural language processing models, they were so bad. And they just didn't work, even with large amounts of data, but especially like a small startup with small data, just didn't work. So the fact that all of that knowledge is embedded in something that you can just use, it does really change the returns to a lot of stuff. There was a lot of sources of proprietary information and proprietary know-how that's just been blown up. Also in the finance sector, like huge amounts of machine learning to go into trading and to do natural language processing for understanding, speeches that executives make and things like that. Now anybody can do that. So, people were profiting off of that and it's harder now. So a lot of that is, I think, good for efficiency, that people have market power due to their size and ability to access data, and a lot of that's been democratized. So I think it is a very exciting moment. It's the most exciting moment that I've seen in my career in terms of the possibilities for having a more efficient, competitive marketplace around these things. But it's so delicate, so we do have to be careful.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Athey. I think it was quite an insightful, and as everyone is saying, head-spinning session. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Thank you again, Prof, for stopping by and sharing your very insightful research and all the work that's being done on this very important topic. Let me not hold anyone else behind. Let's head over to the plenary. And if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure the professor will be ready and willing to answer anything else.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you.